A retired engineer in Michigan underpaid his property tax bill, not by thousands of dollars, by $8.41. The county foreclosed on a property he owned, sold it at auction for $24,500, and kept every single penny. Not just the $8 he owed, all of it. And for years, in a dozen states across America, that was completely legal. This is the story of how the government could take your entire home over a tiny tax debt, the Supreme Court case that finally stopped it, and the brand new 2026 ruling that just complicated everything all over again. Here's what almost everyone assumes. If you fall behind on your property taxes, the government can come after what you owe. Maybe they put a lien on the house. Maybe, in the worst case, they eventually sell it. But surely, they can only take what you actually owe and give you back the rest. It feels obvious. It's how a normal debt works. And in most of the country that's true. But in a handful of states, it wasn't true at all. To see how far this could go, meet Geraldine Tyler. In 1999, she bought a one-bedroom condominium in Minneapolis. She lived there for years. Then, around 2010, in her early 80s, her family helped move her into a senior community after a string of unsettling incidents in the neighborhood, including a nearby shooting. And in the shuffle of that move, one thing slipped. She stopped paying the property taxes on the condo she'd left behind. At first, she owed about $2,300 in unpaid taxes, but once you fall behind, the state piles on interest, penalties, and fees. By the time the county acted, that debt had ballooned to roughly $15,000. So in 2015, Hennepin County did what its law allowed. It seized her condominium and it sold it. The county sold Geraldine Tyler's condo for $40,000. Her tax debt, with every penalty attached, was about $15,000, which means after settling what she owed, there was around $25,000 left over, her equity. The value she'd built in that home, the county kept all of it. Geraldine Tyler, 94 years old, walked away with nothing. So, how does the government end up owning your house in the first place? Let's walk through the machinery, because it matters. It starts with a lien. When you miss your property taxes, the government doesn't just send you to collections like a credit card company. It attaches a claim directly to the property itself. The house becomes the collateral. Next comes a grace period. The law calls it redemption. For a year or more, depending on the state, you can still save the house by paying what you owe, plus the interest and penalties. But if that window closes and you still haven't paid, the government can foreclose, take ownership, and put the property up for sale, usually at a public auction. Now, states do this in two very different ways, and the difference is the whole ballgame. In some states, the government just sells the debt to a private investor. In others, like Minnesota and Michigan, the government takes the house outright, sells it, and, in the versions we're talking about, historically claimed the entire sale price, not the debt, the whole thing. And that's the heart of it. Picture it simply. You hand a cashier a $100 bill to pay for a $20 item. You expect $80 back. Now imagine the cashier just keeps the 100, keeps your change, calls it even. That's what critics say these tax laws did. You owed 20, they took 100, and they pocketed the difference. And this wasn't some rare glitch that hit one unlucky person. A property rights law firm, the Pacific Legal Foundation, studied it. And what they found was staggering. Between 2014 and 2021, in the 12 states plus Washington that allowed this, they counted at least 8,600 homes taken this way, stripping more than $780 million in equity from the people who'd owned them. And it fell hardest on the people least able to fight back. According to that research, the homeowners caught in this were disproportionately elderly, sick, or low income. People like Geraldine Tyler moved into assisted living and losing track of a bill, someone with dementia, a widow on a fixed income. The system didn't care why you fell behind, miss the deadline, lose the house, lose everything in it. So, the obvious question is, how was that ever legal? Doesn't the Constitution protect your property? It does. And here's the exact clause. The Fifth Amendment says the government can take your property, but only if it pays you fairly for it, just compensation. So the argument was simple. When the government keeps $25,000 of your equity to satisfy a $15,000 debt, it has taken that extra value, and it hasn't paid you a cent for it. And this idea that a debt collector can't keep more than the debt, is not some modern invention. It is genuinely ancient. When the Supreme Court took up Geraldine Tyler's case, the Chief Justice traced this rule back centuries. Through Magna Carta in 1215, through an Old English statute that required any surplus from a tax sale be returned to the owner, through the legal writings the American founders studied. For 800 years, the rule was the same. Take what you're owed, return the rest. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, put it in one line that captures the whole case. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but no more. Pay your taxes, yes. But the government's claim ends at the debt. Everything above it is still yours. But there was a problem standing in the way, an older Supreme Court case that seemed to say the opposite. Back in 1956, in a case called Nelson, the court had let New York City keep surplus value from a property it took over unpaid charges. For decades, states pointed to that case and said, "See, the Supreme Court already blessed this." So how did the court get around its own precedent? With a crucial distinction. In that older New York case, the owner actually could have gotten the surplus back. The law gave them a way to ask for it. They just hadn't. New York had a door, even if it was easy to miss. Minnesota's law, the court said, had no door at all. There was simply no way for Geraldine Tyler to ever recover her $25,000. And that's what made it a taking. So, in May of 2023, the Supreme Court ruled, 9 justices to 0, unanimous. In an era where the court splits bitterly on almost everything, all 9 agreed on this. Keeping the surplus value of someone's home beyond the tax they owed is an unconstitutional taking. Geraldine Tyler was owed her equity back. And 2 of the justices went even further. Justice Gorsuch, joined by Justice Jackson, wrote separately to say, this practice might violate a second part of the Constitution too, the 8th Amendment's ban on excessive fines. Losing a whole house over a small tax debt, they suggested, isn't just an uncompensated taking. It may also be a punishment so out of proportion that it's unconstitutional on its own. Now, Tyler wasn't the first crack in this system. The real fight started in Michigan, and it produced 2 cases that are almost hard to believe. The first, in the Michigan Supreme Court in 2020, was the $8.41 case we opened with. The second, in a federal appeals court in 2022, saw a home worth around $300,000 taken over a tax debt of about $22,000. The county handed it to a city for that debt. The city then sold it for a single dollar to a private company, and that company resold it for $308,000. Both courts said the same thing Tyler later would. You can't keep more than you're owed. So, how did a state end up with a law like that? In Michigan's case, it came from a single reform. In 1999, Michigan overhauled how it handled delinquent property taxes. The new system was faster and harsher. Fall behind. And after a short window, the government could take full, absolute title to your property and everything it was worth. It was meant to deal with abandoned, blighted properties. But it swept up people like Uri Raffaeli, too. And once Tyler came down from the Supreme Court, the ground shifted fast. In the years since the ruling, a wave of states rewrote their tax foreclosure laws to make sure surplus equity goes back to the homeowner. By the count of the Pacific Legal Foundation, the firm that fought these cases, at least 19 states have acted. A single unanimous decision reshaped property law across the country. The question seemed settled. Take the debt, return the rest. And then, in 2026, the Supreme Court came back to it. Because winning the principle turned out to be only half the battle, the next fight was about a number. Exactly how much do you get back? That question landed at the Supreme Court in a new case out of Isabella County, Michigan, decided in June of 2026. A family's home, owned for decades, foreclosed over a tax debt of about $2,200, a debt the family argued it never truly owed in the first place. Here's where it gets sharp. The tax debt was roughly $2,200. The home was valued for tax purposes at close to $194,000, but at the foreclosure auction, it sold for $76,008. So, under Tyler, the family should get the surplus back. But the surplus above what, exactly? The $76,000 it actually sold for? Or the much higher amount the home was really worth? On June 23, 2026, the Supreme Court answered, and once again, it was unanimous, 9-0. But this time, the unanimous answer was not the one homeowners were hoping for. The court ruled that when the government sells your foreclosed home at a fair auction, the compensation you're owed is measured by what that auction actually brought in, the sale price, not the home's higher market value. Think of it as the difference between what your car is really worth and what it fetches at a rushed garage sale. The court said, in the tax sale context, you're owed the garage sale price. For the Isabella County family, that meant the gap between $76,000 and the home's real value simply wasn't theirs to recover. Justice Alito, writing for the court, grounded it in that same long history. For hundreds of years, he wrote, the law has allowed governments to seize and sell property to collect a tax, as long as they hand back the surplus. And the surplus, historically, was measured against what the sale brought in. So the baseline is the sale price, not some hypothetical market value. So, who's right? This is where reasonable people genuinely disagree. And it's not our place to pick a side. Even on this unanimous court, Justice Thomas wrote separately to say, his instinct is that owners should generally get fair market value. The counties argued the opposite. Give us a clean, administrable number, or the whole system breaks down. Both are staring at the same Constitution. And here's the part that keeps this alive. The court said the auction price counts, but only if the auction was, in its words, fairly conducted. What makes an auction fair? The court didn't fully say. One justice pointedly noted the majority left, that undefined. So the fight simply moves to a new front. Was this sale run fairly, or was it rigged to sell low? That question was sent back to the lower courts, unresolved, and critics point to something else. Even in states where keeping the surplus is now illegal, some make the process of claiming your money back so confusing that many people never get it. The advocates who fought these cases call it, bluntly, home equity theft, just in a quieter form. So, what does all of this actually mean? This is general education, not legal advice. The bottom line, the era where the government could take your home over a small tax bill and simply pocket all your equity is, constitutionally, over. 9-0, twice. If you lose a home to tax foreclosure, you are owed the surplus back. But how that surplus is measured and how hard you may have to fight to actually collect it is still being worked out, right now, in courtrooms across the country. Step back, and it's really one very old argument, still going. From a document sealed in a field in England, to a condo in Minneapolis, to a courtroom in 2026. The same principle the whole way through. The government can collect its debt. It just can't keep more than it's owed. So, can the government take your house over a $2,000 tax bill? It can take the house, yes, to collect what you owe. But it can no longer just keep the rest, the equity you spent a lifetime building. That took a unanimous Supreme Court and centuries of history to nail down. And the last chapter, exactly how much of your home's value you get to keep, is still being written. A retired engineer lost his house over $8.41. Because of these cases, that can't happen the same way again. Now you know why. Now you know